The Fairy Whispering Podcast explores guests' encounters with the other world of fairy and ways of connecting with this realm. From listening to messages in owls' hoots, finding a four-leaf clover, chasing rainbows, or inviting a gnome to dinner. I'm Claire Sylvan-Wand, a fairy whisperer, researcher, and your guide on this journey. Take my hand and step into the twilit woodland, where they are waiting to meet you. Hello and welcome to my listeners. Thank you for supporting the show. I continue to create this podcast not because of the amount of downloads, which aren't very many in the whole scheme of things, but because I just really enjoy creating this for you, for the listeners that are listening and interested in the guests that I have and the stories that they have to share. My main why for doing this has always been to bring some enchantment and upliftment and joy and a bit more love into the world, really. That's always been the purpose of my work, whether it's my artwork or creating this podcast or writing. I've come up to my favourite spot for recording episode intros and outros on Dartmoor. It's a lovely spot that looks out over the Lustley Cleeve and the woodlands below. So I'm literally sat on the edge of a valley looking down onto the tops of trees. For those of you interested in seeing photos, I'll put some on my website for this episode. I'm recovering from the flu, so I'm very sort of last minute with doing the final finishing touches for this episode. I've let go of a few things recently, so I no longer have a Patreon community. I wanted to create some more space for my writing and artwork as well, so I've chosen to let go of Patreon for now, but I still have a Buy Me a Coffee page, which you're welcome to make a one-off contribution to if you enjoy this episode and you want to support me going forwards. I've also decided to continue with the audio version of this podcast. The podcast will continue on audio platforms as well as my YouTube channel, so nothing's really going to change there. I recorded this episode back in September with illustrator Ethan Pennell, who is the creator of the Dartmoor Folklore Map. Ethan shares strange tales of phantom monks, spectral woodland, a bleeding cottage, pixies and much more that he has captured on his brilliant Dartmoor Folklore Map. Plus, Ethan shares his family's account of a truly enchanting fairy encounter that you won't want to miss. We met at Newbridge car park on Dartmoor and walked along the River Dart, passing over Deeper Marsh, where the pixies dance, and onto Buckland Bridge, where we took the gate into Blackadon Nature Reserve and then climbed up from there to Blackadon Tor, where we had lunch before returning to Newbridge. Whilst at Blackadon Tor, I captured the sound of the church bells chiming in the background. However, on reviewing the recording, the bells seemed to be distorted into a creepy music box style tune. Could this be the Tricksy Pixies? Let me know what you think. Enjoy this episode and I will come back to you at the end with some closing thoughts. Hello, welcome to the Fairy Whispering podcast. I've come to Newbridge today to meet with an artist called Ethan Pennell. Welcome, Ethan.
Thank you, Claire.
It's
Hello.
wonderful to be here with you today. I found out about Ethan because he's created a marvellous folklore map of Dartmoor, where he's illustrated all of the folklore across Dartmoor, and there's a wonderful key to all the different places. So there's pixie places, haunted places, invisible cottages, which I'm really interested in. Yeah, it's just a minefield of wonderful magical information. As we were walking down this path towards the River Dart, you were just saying about how if something hits you...
In Romany law,
Yeah.
there are certain plants, for example, or even creatures, if they touch you, or if an oak leaf falls on you, it means you'll have good luck for that day. So we've just both been hit by an acorn, so I like to think that's a good sign. I'm already being distracted by all these wonderful
let's have a look.
examples of fungi and
Yeah, do you know what that is? That type?
it's a bracket fungi, isn't it? But it's very spongy and orange, so I've never seen one before.
It's a real kind of contrast to the colours of the tree, isn't it? It's bright orange fungus.
Yeah.
And you've got some pennywort on your map, haven't you?
I have.
Which is, to me, is like an iconic plant on Dartmoor, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah.
And all those plants on the map have a folk tale to tell, but you're now going to ask me what's the link to pennywort. And I'm trying to remember. I think it probably is a fairy plant, actually.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So I'll have to look that one up and get back to you.
Yeah. No, don't worry. I'm sure it'll come to you at some point. So just as we go down this perilous slope, maybe we'll just watch where we're going first. I was just interested to know how it all started with your, interest in creating a map of Dartmoor folklore. Where did the idea come from? How was it inspired?
Mm-hmm.
And the beginnings of your interest in creating a map.
Oh, well, I mean, my love of folklore goes right back to childhood, but maybe we can always talk about that later. The actual map itself, it began. I've only been living down this way for about 13 years, so I'm a bit of a blow-in. But I came down because of my love of Dartmoor. Mm. And as an artist, I'm interested in illustrating folktales. Folktales linked to place.
Yes.
And usually the place where I'm living. Mm. So I started with some oil paintings. So, my first one was the Wished Hounds of Wistman's Wood.
Okay.
And I know we were talking earlier about Wistman's Wood and that need to take care, not to actually go into the wood now, to preserve it. So that was my first one. And then I created another oil painting.
So I'll just draw your attention to these little doorways in the bottom of the tree.
Well, that's something else I've been photographing is sort of fairy trees over my time in the moors. So my second one was the Ghost of Lady Howard. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the listeners are familiar with any of these stories, but again, I can tell you more about that later.
Yeah, sure.
But briefly, she was supposed to have... Well, the folk tale is that she murdered 4 of her husbands, and so her spectral coach is made from the bones of these unfortunate men. And so there's a skull on each end of the carriage, the top of the carriage. So, and for her penance, she has to travel from Tavistock, where she used to live, to Oakhampton Castle and pick a blade of grass from the castle grounds. And once the grass has been removed, then she will be free. But of course, as we know, grass keeps growing. So that was my second one. And then the third one was an illustration of the phantom monks that have been seen traversing along the Lich Way, which was the old coffin path.
Yes.
So back in the medieval period, if you lived within the Dartmoor Forest region, as it was known then, you could only be buried at Lidford Church.
Right.
And so if you lived in, say, Hexworthy, you're talking 12, 15 miles, quite an arduous journey, often in rough weather, over rough terrain. But then in 1266, the law changed and you could be buried closer to home if need be. But over the years, people started to see phantom monks along this path. And what's lovely about this is when I exhibited this painting, so it's actually been painted on an old cloth map of Dartmoor. Someone came up to me and she said, I've actually seen those monks. I didn't know the story. I was walking along the Lich Way and they appeared just as you portrayed them, coming out of the mist.
Yeah.
And then...
Hello.
And then about a month or so ago, a friend of mine bought the map and she saw the Lich Way image on it and she said, I saw them exactly where you've put them on the map, just above Wistman's Wood. So I've had two confirmations about that one. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm rambling here.
No, carry on, it's great. I'm loving this. I'm listening, I'm thinking of things I want to share with myself in a minute.
So then I started a fourth oil painting. Now we're talking 2 or 3 years at this point.
Yeah.
So I'm very slow when it comes to oil painting. So then I started one, it was about Vixen Tor, the witch of Vixen Tor. But at this point I started to think, you know what, I'd like to do more and more of these. I kept discovering new stories, and I thought I'd love to create a map. And I was doing a short course in illustration at Arts University. Well, it used to be called Plymouth College of Art. It's called Arts University.
Should we just
Plymouth
stand
now.
here, Ethan? Because we're actually this is the iconic spot that Crossing mentioned, wasn't it? About the pixies dancing. It's alongside the Dart, and it's where the pixies dance. So I just wanted to mention that to people listening. Describe where we are. It's a big green area of grass. There's trees. There's the River Dart flowing by. Over the other side there's some high cliffs and woodland. Yes.
And we have a potential fairy tree.
And we have a
right in front of us, don't we?
rowan tree in front of me. It looks like it's listening intently to our conversation, and like there's little dewdrops on the leaves and the berries, just so you get the scene, everyone that's listening. So carry on, Ethan.
Yes, so where was I? Yes, so I was doing this course and I did a very sort of brief Dartmoor Folklore Map, just knocked it up in a day or two. Very basic, painted by hand. And that was the start of it, and I realised that I couldn't carry on with oil painting, so I switched to pen and ink, which was new to me at the time. But I thought, well, at least I can get a few more pictures done, in a fairly reasonable time frame. And so that's when it started. We're talking about 7 years ago, and it just grew from there. And I researched the stories, got me out onto the moors. So every weekend, I'd think, well, where can I go today? Let's go and see this pixie side, or let's try and find the haunted cottage, or whatever. So it's been an absolute labour of love. And it hasn't finished yet, because I'm working on the book now that will accompany the map. So the stories are all properly referenced. What's lovely now is I'm hearing more stories first-hand, or orally sort of transmitted, whereas at the beginning it was all the stories came from old books or articles. But now, I mean, Yeah, including your own lovely stories that potentially could be added.
Yes, yeah, I'll be honoured. To be featured in your book. It's I think it's so important, isn't it? Share like you're doing. I'm doing in a similar way. Other people that are connecting with folklore, fairy lore. But as soon as you start sharing, like you're finding, people start to come forward and open up and say, "Oh, actually, I've seen that." These experiences aren't something that are just in fusty old books. Some wonderful fusty old books, by the way, from the past. It's actually living folklore, isn't it? That you're discovering now. And how wonderful that people are thinking, "Oh, I trust this person. I will share my story with them."
Yeah.
And then it all adds to that ongoing record.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's so important to keep alive, isn't it?
Just this feeling of re-enchantment that we need so much.
Oh, yes.
At this time. I think that's it for me. It is. That's what it's about. It's just being able to tell some stories connected to a place that people love. And it's, hopefully it will encourage more people to go out and discover these places with respect for the non-humans.
Yeah. Yes.
Whichever form they take. But I mean, that actually is the key. It's go out and see these places, but actually be more mindful that you're not alone, that we are connected to these other beings.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. It's really important. And you have a lovely piece. Did you want to read that now? Read the title again.
It's called Revenge of the Land Spirits.
Yeah.
And it was published in Moof magazine, issue 11. It was in January this year.
Yeah.
And it's really about, it says it in the title really, so respecting the land spirits, otherwise you could get your comeuppance. So it's got a lot of stories linked to Dartmoor in particular, but also further afield. I'm sure you're aware of what's happened in Iceland, for example, or Ireland. An elf's dwelling in Iceland, or a fairy tree in Ireland has been threatened or cut down even. So, shall I just read a little bit then?
Yeah, just read a little excerpt.
So for many centuries, humans have had a symbiotic relationship with land spirits, one based largely on reverence for our non-human neighbours. This article explores what happens when this breaks down and why it is important to repair the damage. In A Book of the West, 1899, the Reverend Sabine Baring-Gould tells of a rich Lancashire man who had purchased thousands of acres of Dartmoor land and begun reclaiming it using the latest technology. One day he met an old moorman with a message for him. Now, I'm going to fail here with my Devonshire accent.
Okay.
Last night I fooled asleep, and then I saw the girt spirit of the moors, old Crochan himself, grey as granite, and his eyebrows hanging down over his glimmering eyes like sedge, and his eyes deep as peat water pools. Says he to me, "Bear Muster Vowler a message from me. Tell Muster Vowler, if he scratches my back, I'll tear out his pocket." The warning was justified, the foolhardy businessman going bankrupt soon after. As for old Crochan, on dark, stormy nights, he emerges from Crochan Tor, riding a skeletal horse and wielding a mighty sword, perhaps ready to smoke down anyone who dares mess with the land. Shall I continue?
Yes, if you want to, yeah.
Happy to. Despite his role as guardian spirit of the moor, old Crochan could not prevent large-scale extractivism from taking its toll on Dartmoor, as historic tin mining and more contemporary ventures, such as the China clay works on the southern fringes of the moor, show. This doesn't mean that old Crochan has necessarily given up or even lost the fight. I'm just going to insert a bit here, because obviously we've had the recent protests against wild camping on Dartmoor, and the spirit of old Crochan was actually raised as part of that protest. So he is live and kicking, well, as alive as a spirit can be. As the medieval historian Licuto points out, It would seem that land spirits are never vanquished once and for all. They can be repelled, but they remain vigilant, ever ready to seize any opportunity to take back their property. Locuto's land spirits, or Genius Lucorium, refer to numen or diamonds attached to specific wild places, which they fiercely protect against any onslaught. According to folklore and myth, these spirits of place can assume multiple forms, from giants, dwarves and dragons to gods, goddesses, and the devil itself. Eco-psychologist Betsy Perles takes Locuto's sentiment a stage further, believing that if ignored, the land spirits, instead of dying, transform instead into cultural, environmental and personal pathologies. It certainly pays not to disregard them. When the fens were drained by the Dutch in the 17th century, another guardian spirit, the Tiddymun, unleashed pestilence on the local populace as punishment. They eventually appeased him by pouring pails of water into the dry dikes. Back on Dartmoor, Old Crochan is not the only land spirit to fight back. Earth gnomes used to dwell in a fairy hill at Fernworthy, long before the area was submerged by a reservoir. When the first farmstead was built on the site, the gnomes took their revenge, stealing the farmer's firstborn one winter's eve. Moreover, the legend of Dartmoor's Chaw Gully mine chronicles how the place, a purported site of hidden treasure, is guarded by an ancient raven perched on a rocky outcrop above, as well as creatures of a more hideous disposition lurking deep within its recesses. Whenever a prospective gold digger is lowered down the mine shaft on a rope, the raven croaks loudly. A gnarled hand bearing a knife suddenly appears from the side of the shaft and cuts the cord. The following morning, the victim's broken body is found sprawled out amongst the nearby heather. A stark reminder never to steal from the fey folk of the mines. They are known locally as the Knockers, due to the nocturnal habit of making knocking sounds with their magical thunder axes while deep underground.
You can support the podcast. You can give a one-off donation on my Fairy Whisperer Buy Me a Coffee page. Follow me on Instagram at Fairy Whispering Podcast. I also have a YouTube channel with video versions of episodes and other videos about how to connect with fairies and some peeks into pixie places on Dartmoor. You can get in touch on my contact form on my website or by emailing me claire@fairywhisperer.co.uk. All of this info is in the description for the episode.
There is a pixie that actually lives there, or lived there, or
Yeah.
Grimsby.
Oh yes, in the Webburn Valley.
Yes.
Mm.
Now, I'm just checking. I think he was referenced in Crossing, William Crossing's book.
Right.
Not the one that's specifically on pixies, but one on Dartmoor Folklore that was published after he died. It was in 1997, actually. It's a really lovely source with local folklore. There's not much else I can tell you about him, really. Just that that's where he lives. I don't know where the name came from.
It's a good name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of conjures up a sense of what he was like or what he looked like. We're just passing the River Dart and there's some people swimming here. It's traditionally one of a popular place for swimming, but recently swimming has been officially banned by the landowner, which I think's a shame, because for years, since I was a child, I've come here swimming. It's always been a popular place. I think it's sort of a case of people being mindful of the place and respecting it, and maybe it's more to do with a small minority of people not respecting the place, and that's where the landowner's getting fed up. For example, there's burn marks in the earth where people have lit fires and not which is something I don't think you're supposed to do, are you, on Dartmoor Lighthouse? So it's more, I think, majority of people that come here appreciate the place, respect it, leave without a trace, which we all need to do in these beautiful places. But maybe it's, what do you think, Ethan? Do you think it's just like a minority of people that are coming and not following the country code or honouring the place that's causing this?
I hope so. I'd like to think so. It's hard to know, isn't it? But I think it is. I know so many people that really care about this place.
Yeah.
I'm just being distracted by some other wonderful.
Oh, look at this! There's lots of. It's toadstool season. It's growing out with some horse pony poo. They're beautiful, aren't they? They're almost luminous.
Just going back to the name Grimji. I mean, Grim.
Yeah.
Grim's an old word. I mean, it has been used to denote the devil, but prior to that, it was a word for Odin, I think, because you've got Grim's Pound on Dartmoor, haven't you? Grim's Grave. So, I mean, that word in itself conjures up a sense of the otherworldly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and it's the old name for the devil, isn't it?
Yeah.
Grim.
The old rose hips.
Oh, look, it's that time of year for rose hips.
Gorgeous.
Oh, they're lovely. You can make tea from them, can't you? They're quite otherworldly, aren't they, the rose hips? Yeah, over that way.
Yeah.
Sort of diagonal. Yeah.
And there's a lovely story here. This is this would have been from the 1920s, 30s. And Mrs. M. Eckett Filden wrote in. This is to the transactions of the Devonshire Association.
Yes. Yeah.
So a Mrs. F. of Widdicombe said her grandfather and father saw pixies in the Dimpsey, in the mires of at Buckland. And the grandfather believed that they were sent from hell, the vapours of hell, as a warning to drunkards, gamblers and such like. And that there was something different from this life.
Oh.
And that hellfire would be the punishment of the wicked. There you go.
Some little crab apples, I think. Little crab apples. Oh, that's a great story, isn't it? Because that's wonderful kind of variation on the theme. Because a lot of the time in these stories, people are kind of shamed that, oh, you were drunk when you saw that, or this person was insane. Whereas that's turning it around and saying, well, the pixies are, if you see them, they're a sign of, but still not good, but they're a sign of evil and the devil, and but it's kind of like somebody recognising that this was a real experience, but it wasn't a good experience to have.
Sure.
And now, I don't know, these spirits are mischievous, but they're not out to get us, I don't think. I think they're just my take on it. I mean, what's your take on
I agree with you.
pixies?
No, I think as long as we respect them,
Yeah.
they tend to leave us alone these days anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some lovely old stories, isn't there, that, of people being helped by them. And
Yes.
and then as long as they then recognise that help, then there was this wonderful relationship that could probably, last as long as us humans lived. These humans, in the story lived, I should say. Of course, if you ignored them, then that's another story. If they've done some good work for you, a good deed, and you didn't return it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's that. I think that's more symbolic of this give and take, isn't it? This reciprocity that we'll show you respect if you show us respect, but like anyone, like any of us, if someone came and trampled on our home or took something from us without asking, it's a natural reaction, isn't it, to be upset about that. Yet when you're dealing with magical creatures or these beings from this other in-between realm with these incredible powers, then you're in a bit more trouble than
Absolutely.
than an annoyed neighbour shouting at you.
I mean, there's certainly, I don't see them as these as these twee creatures that the Victorians love to depict. I mean, they can appear in all shapes and sizes, can't they? For example, they're not always miniature, and they don't always have wings.
No.
So I think they can be really fierce, and they might not want to interact with us. We might want to, even if we did reach out to them, they may well turn away. But,
yes.
Fair enough.
Yeah. It's
No, I don't see them as evil.
No. You mentioned the hidden folk in Iceland and how they just seem to appear from rocks to certain people, don't they? And they quickly disappear, or they take people into their realm. And they come back, but it's just very subtle. I think fairies are very, like you say, unless they want to get a message across quite strongly, if we've upset them in some way, they just keep themselves to themselves. Yeah. Oh, isn't this beautiful, this stretch of river here? Ethan, that's where I'd like to swim. It's really inviting there.
I might come back here later. I've got my swimming gear with me, just in case.
I always keep mine in the car.
Yeah.
Let's record a bit of the river. Could you say a little bit about if you want to, share a bit about your childhood connection to folklore, the other world? I mean, anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, some of this stuff has only come to light recently. I'm a quarter Irish, so my mum grew up in Ireland. My nan's from Donegal, my mum's mum. And my mum has a very vivid recollection as a child of being shown a fairy.
Oh.
So her granddad basically took her to this field and he had the fairy on his hand. This was a small one.
Oh, good.
So that was a major, really sort of transformative time for my mum.
That's an amazing thing.
So that story's been in the family, since I was a child. So I already, growing up, it was like, okay, cool. My mum saw a fairy.
Fairies in the family. Did she describe what it looked like? Or which way? Which way are we going, by the way?
I think we do actually walk up the road.
Walk up the road.
I don't know if it's possibly a route through there, but
I think that might go up to Lee Tor. It's quite steep.
We're aiming to go through I think there's an entrance to the path that leads you along by the river to the Wedding Valley.
Oh, okay.
I don't recall any further details. Just that it was very small. I can't even walk. No, she hasn't told me the colour or anything like that. Whether did it have wings? Did it not? I'll have to get back to her.
Yeah, that's interesting. I asked Ethan if he could speak with his mother and find out any more information about this fairy encounter. So Ethan very kindly did so, and he sent me a small write-up from after he spoke to his mum. In the early 1950s, Mum was around 2 to 4 years old. Her granddad, John Friel, carried her on his shoulders to see the fairies that lived at the bottom of his field in Glen, County Donegal. He put his hand out to show her one of them. It was small and of different colours, mainly purple and green. Mum can't remember categorically whether it had wings or not, but she thinks so.
Yeah, the other interesting thing is I've actually brought an extract with me. So, my nan used to be called an O'Sheil, and we came across this a while back. This is from a book called Fairy Healing, The Law and the Legacy, by Margie MacArthur.
Oh,
familiar?
Okay, I've not heard of that one, but it sounds a good one.
So it's talking about Irish healing traditions,
Yeah.
and it mentions... there we go. Many of these procedures and charms, so she's talking about fairy doctors in particular.
Yeah.
Many of these procedures and charms were preserved traditionally by the people and handed down through families, since the profession of physician was hereditary in certain families, and mentions the O'Sheils, the O'Lees and the O'Hickey families among them. So this accumulated lore was usually handed down from generation to generation in these families in the careful way of oral transmission, hands-on teaching, and example. So I'd like, it's nice to think that maybe some of that fairy, that love of the fairies has come from this ancestral connection. My mum is also a medium, so she sees spirit all the time, very matter-of-fact about it, incredibly down-to-earth as well.
Yes.
So that's always been there. So I guess from an early age, I was already infused with these stories.
Yeah.
And then I grew up in a time, so I grew up in the 70s, 80s, when as a child there was a lot of culture, if you want to call it that, that focused on otherworldly stuff, TV programmes, even children's stuff, like Bagpuss and...
I'm a child of the 70s, so I know.
Mr. Ben, But,
oh gosh, yes, Mr. Ben.
But I also remember collecting crisp packets. I think there were ones called Bones and Ribs and stuff like that. So there was a spookiness as well.
Yeah, there was, wasn't there?
Is that a Cormorant or Shag?
Oh, wow. Look at him.
So I used to buy Whoopi comic.
Yes.
And that was full of ghost stories. Wonderful illustrations by Ken Reid. So on the back of each comic there was a series called Worldwide Weirdies, and readers could write in and say, could you they come up with something, I don't know, a play on words. It might be sort of, I think there's one, a recreation of Epping Forest, but it's a spooky version. And so these drawings, these images, illustrations really captured my imagination. And then my dad was a massive fan of Arthur Rackham's, so we had his books around the house, and I used to be taken out on, at the time they were called Daddy's nature walks, and he's a big lover of gnarled trees and fungi and stuff like that. So that was a big part of it as well, that love of nature and just the visual delight of being deep in a wood, and the imagination would start to kick in, and feeling the otherworldliness of it as well. This wasn't a place that was day to day. There was something else going on here. So I guess all of that stuff was sort of being infused into me, percolating around.
It's so important, isn't it? It starts in childhood, this building this connection with nature and love of nature, appreciation of it, and also that there's more to life, there's more to the world than what we read in the newspaper or see on telly.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like you had a really brilliant, supportive family that encouraged that, and your grandfather as well. Was it your grandfather? Yes, that showed your mother the fairy.
So that would be, yes. So yeah, I guess that'd be my great grandfather.
Great grandfather. So, right.
So I guess I don't know. And then also I suppose this may have played a part. So my mum's father has got Romany heritage, so maybe some of that has played a part down the down the line. Certainly there was this sense of wonder that I had as a child, which has never left me.
Yes, I can relate to that.
A sense,
so important. Yeah, high five to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even a sense of mischievousness, playfulness. I think that's the thing that I love about the fairy folk. That's what I'm getting from them. That's what they're teaching to me. That actually, yes, there's lots of things I get upset about, environmental issues, etc., etc. But there also needs to be hope, and there needs to be a sense of enchantment. And I've held on to that through life. It's it's very healing.
Me too. But have you got any tips for people? Because there are people who will be listening to this that are thinking, I've never had that as a child. How do I cultivate that in my life? Have you got any insights of your own about how you've managed to keep that sense of wonder and stay on that path?
I mean, if you're lucky enough to be curious, then that's going to get you a long way. So explore that curiosity. If you haven't got that, then I'm hoping that you might be able to cultivate it. I think it's just about noticing what you like, what you enjoy, and there's a shift. I realised when I started talking. Well, when I'm talking about this stuff, something happens to me. I could have had a really late night, not slept, but suddenly I feel alive again. It's almost like you're plugging into this sort of energy circuit. I mean, even just walking in a place like this, that does it for me.
Yes.
So I think getting out, going for a walk, I find that really clears my head, enables me to stay grounded. But yeah, it's going to be different for everyone. But just noticing, even if it's one little thing. It could be something as simple as I can hear a bird singing.
Yeah.
Maybe, starting with that, maybe just noticing at the end of the day what even if things are really, really tough, what can I actually focus on one or two things that were good today? Maybe someone smiled at me, or I saw this beautiful tree, or I heard some music that made me want to dance. So I'm really, up for this idea of just focusing on the small stuff, and you just start to build it up. But always asking, well, what do I enjoy doing, and doing more of it. I know it sounds simple and it's not always easy, but
there are times when I thought, that was a nice walk, or maybe I'll just see what's over there.
Yeah.
And then I've not lost another hour, it's the wrong way to put it, but it'll take another hour or so, because it's like that with Dartmoor, isn't it? Once you start exploring and you get carried away, and then all of a sudden you think, oh gosh, it's going to take me an hour to get back to there.
Well, also we're not rushing it, are we? We're walking in a nice sort of steady pace, as a nice steady pace. But it almost feels like, it's interesting, as we're talking about all this stuff, it's almost like we are going into, that sort of time, that sort of fairyland time. If you know what I mean. Where you think we've only been away for a couple of minutes, but actually it's been hours, or I won't say years.
I find that, especially when I'm with people of like mind, and we get into these conversations, which are important conversations.
Yes.
But it can lose time, but in a good way. It's not like, it's not a bad thing to lose time, but like you say, we sort of enter into this other sort of state of mind.
Slow down, don't you?
Slow down, yeah. Yeah. It's all really good. Because bearing in mind,
Yeah.
I always keep in mind is there are loads of people that will listen to this, hopefully, and they won't know anything
No.
about the places we're talking about or the stories. And I like to think that some of the atmosphere of the place comes through
Absolutely.
as we're talking through the Dartmoor.
Definitely, and on the back of my map, I'm trying to remember what I wrote now, but I talk about moss strewn, and it really feels like that, doesn't it? This place?
Yes, yeah, it does. It feels.
I'm really loving moss and lichen at the moment.
Yeah, quite hard to draw, I
Yes.
think.
Yes.
I find it easier to paint,
Yeah.
like with watercolour or whatever, but
I really like your artwork, by the way, as well.
thank you.
And the fact that you are actually, you're seeing these beings and they're coming, they're just. Do when you create them? Are you ever creating them as immediately after you've seen a being, or do you normally go home and?
So sometimes I've sat in places like woodlands, and there's some beautiful woodlands up in Buckland in the moor. There's a woodland called Grey Park Woods, which this road goes up past eventually.
Yeah.
And I've sat there and drawn. Or sometimes I just take photographs and draw from those, and I quite often mirror my photos. So I'll see like half a face or in a tree or in a rock, and then I mirror it, and it reveals even more, and then that inspires my art as well. Oh wow. This is the River Weeben. Yeah.
Yes, of course, and that's
Through
right.
here.
And then
Yeah, right. Blackadon Nature Reserve. Wildlife Trust.
So now we are in Grimsby territory.
Grimsby territory, wow. So you were saying, I can't remember whether we recorded that bit, but Grimsby is a pixie that's supposed to live here, that haunts these woods. Yeah. So I don't know if I said at the beginning, but Ethan and I have met at Newbridge, parked there, and then we walked to, it's not called Spitchwick Common, the name's gone out of my head, but we walked across the common where it's quite popular with people to picnic and swim. And then we've come up a lane and come into Blackadon Nature Reserve. We're walking along the River Weeben, and on Ethan's map I noticed there's a whole concentration of folklore in this area, isn't there, Ethan?
There is, yes.
So at home, you've noted about the magic ointment and the haunted pub. I didn't realise that the pub was haunted there.
Oh, right. I think it was also a haunted vicarage, as far as I'm aware.
Haunted vicarage,
Yes. Haunted by him.
Oh, look. Just, there's a fallen tree to go over. I'm interested, Ethan, in your process of creating your map as well. So, how did you go about it? I mean, what did you start with, and what was your sort of process with creating the map? Because it's taken you 7 years, and I appreciate Dartmoor's a big place.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, in terms of creating the images, I mean, it does vary, but there are some. I mean, the amount of time I've spent on actually creating a composition. I mean, a good example, we go right back to the Wistman's Wood one. And I did take, being very careful, not actually going into the woods, but taking some images of the trees from just outside, getting a feel for the wood itself. But I went late at night because the image is set during around midnight, full moon.
Yeah.
So that was quite an experience in itself. But then, so I took a lot of pictures and then just picked out various trees that I like the look of and created this composition. Did a bit of research on what hounds would look like.
Yeah.
Maybe used a few photographs, that sort of thing. So it's almost like a collage. That's how it started. So often that's what I'll do. I mean, there's even a few. I mentioned earlier the Lich Way painting.
Yes.
So I'm one of the monks. So I dressed up. So a friend's got an old cowl, and
Oh wow.
and I'm sort of holding the images of these monks holding this coffin. So I had to pose in my friend's kitchen with a broom handle that was meant to look like the,
That's amazing.
Yeah. So there's lots of things like that. I got a friend to dress up as Betsy Grimble, the ghost that haunts the tower. Used to be part of Tavistock Abbey.
Yeah.
And she haunts other places as well. So sometimes there's a lot of research and as well, what do they look like? If I don't know, I'll make them up.
Yeah.
But try to be as true to some of the folklore that's related. I think we go up, don't we?
Go up here, right? Just
yeah.
I'll just stop.
So talking a while back, we had some correspondence about phantom cottages.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to talk with you about that.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, this isn't about a phantom cottage as such, but have I mentioned the phantom wood to you?
No, I saw it on your map.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know where it is. So when you look at it, you might think, oh, that's just below Shore Prior. I only put it there because there's no other space.
Right.
But I can tell you the story about it.
Yeah. So can I just record who this is? Because I missed that bit. And then...
Yes, okay.
So this is from...
Oops, where did it... Let me... Oh, yes. So this is in the autobiography... Elizabeth Googe's autobiography. So Elizabeth Googe was a writer. So this is from The Joy of Snow. There's two stories here I'd like to share. She writes about a friend who saw fairies. And she said when she first went to live in her cottage on the moor, she was visited early in the morning by a little old woman wearing a bonnet who walked quietly into the kitchen where she was preparing breakfast. Friendly and smiling, the old woman refused breakfast but sat down to chat. She wanted to know exactly what my friend intended to do in the garden. What flowers would she have? What vegetables? She had very bright eyes and nodded her head in approval as they talked. She seemed a happy old woman, very much at home in the kitchen, but when my friend turned away for a moment, she found, on looking around again, that her visitor had left her. She was never seen again, and when the neighbours were questioned, they denied ever having seen such an old woman in the village.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, a fairy, maybe?
Maybe a fairy godmother or something, yes.
But this is the one I wanted to tell you. So another friend was driving back to her home on the moor one summer evening when she found herself in the most beautiful wood. Maybe this one.
Yeah,
she had no sense of strangeness, but drove through it, entranced by the loveliness of the evening light shining through the trees. Coming out of the wood, she found herself at home, put the car away, and went about the normal business of the evening. And only gradually did she remember that her road home lay through an open stretch of moorland. There was no wood there, not now. The next day she went to see an old man who had lived all his life on the moor and told him what had happened. He nodded his head. "I know the wood, ma'am," he told her. "I've been there myself, but only once. You'll not see it again. It's only once in a lifetime.
Oh, wow. That's given me goosebumps.
What I love about it is that it's fairly recent. You know, she mentions driving a car, so it's not one of those ones that, you know, you often find in books. Oh, you know, from the 19th century or.
And that's I've not come across a phantom wood yet. So, what sort of area was that in? Do you know?
There's no indication at all.
No reference.
Nope.
Because, as you probably know through your phantom cottage research, Theo Brown talks about the phantom of Halsden Manor, doesn't she, near Stoke Fleming? And then she puts at the end of that paragraph, and also there's a Mr. I think it's called Mr. Spencer or something, that had an incident where he almost fell off a cliff because he saw a phantom landscape. Happy to share this with you if you don't have this reference.
No, I don't. Actually.
So I looked it up because she mentioned it was the SPR, the Society for Societal Research. I think I've said that right. Anyway, SPR, and it's a 4-page account from 1948, and these are all on archive.com. And it's a man called Mr. Spence, and he was down here on holiday in 1938, 10 years earlier. He went for a walk along the cliffs above Mansands, which it's a beach just along it's on South Hams.
Oh,
so it's nearer to Brixham
that's
way.
Because I've only been researching the phantom cottages of Dartmoor.
Okay. So this is another one. There's a few in there records. And he had a lovely time on the beach, and he found a little cave. So he went into this cave, and he said it got quite narrow. I think he had to go in on his hands and knees. Came out in this big cavern that was open to, there's a hole so that, you know, the natural light was coming in. Came out of there, back onto the cliffs, and whilst he was walking on the cliffs, he saw this old wall, and the other side of this old wall was this beautiful landscape stretching out in front of him. He climbed over, I climbed over a stile and found myself falling. And he was on the edge of a cliff, and this landscape that he'd seen was like just a phantom landscape. It was, out in front of him. So, and then they go in quite a lot of detail about, they've got a map of where he walked that he drew, and I'd like to look at it on the old OS maps, actually. So I love old maps, that you do. So it's interesting.
I'm really curious because I was wondering, well, could it have been a time slip?
Yeah.
But then, of course, for that to be a time slip, that landscape must have been there once upon a time.
Yeah.
But have you found out the answer to that? Or?
Well, it doesn't say in the article. All it says is maybe, this is landscape that used to be there before it eroded away, like Paul Sands, which is just further around the coast, that disappearing village that disappeared into the sea. So that coast is quite well known for being lots of erosion over the years.
That's interesting, because I have found some really interesting folk tales, strange stories around that area. B Sands as well.
Really?
Yeah, it's in an older copy of the Folklore magazine.
Right.
I can't remember them off the top of my head, but yes, strange appearances. I'll look them up and let you know. So there's definitely I think that area is definitely charged with something. Yes,
because I had an experience there, not to do with phantom cottages, but to do with mermaids. Where I had some singing along that coast.
Yes,
it's a little place. It's like a private cove. I had the fortune of staying in for a weekend. It's like an old fisherman's hut that had been converted into luxury accommodation. Anyway, long story, but managed to get a weekend there. And I heard the wind one night, and it sounded like a woman singing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day I was in this adjacent cove, and I'd been doing some meditation, and I just felt compelled to sing to the sea. So I sang to the sea, and then from the surrounding cliffs and sea, the singing came back to me. So I was doing this call and return.
Yeah.
It was amazing experience. So it's a very special coast.
Well, a sea monster was supposedly seen off the coast there as well many years ago. I'll look up the references, because a sea monster could well not be a sea monster, but a mermaid.
maybe. No, right. Onward. So Ethan has a story about why he uses the name Crowman. I'm really interested in this. So over to Ethan.
Okay. So I created this character, this artistic alter ego, for want of a better term, called the Crowman. It was at a time I was actually, I just started doing some storytelling. I was thinking about performing on stage. I'm much happier just writing the stories now. But I did a storytelling workshop, and I thought, okay, I wanted to create a character. So I've always loved corvids, crows in particular, I'm really drawn to them. So I created a crowman mask, which looks like the old plague doctor ones, made out of cardboard and toilet rolls for eyes, that sort of thing. Actually, if anyone wants to see it, it's the image. Well, it's actually on my map. That's on the front cover of the map. That's a drawing of me dressed as the Crowman, but also on my Instagram site. So I quite like the idea of this Crowman being a cross between a sort of debonair, sort of bohemian character. I was living in London at the time, so there was that sort of pull to the city as well. But also, it links to that wilder, more intuitive side of me. Okay, so I had a top hat, a Victorian top hat. Actually, didn't create it; I bought it. Edwardian frock coat. So I had all the gear, and hadn't really done much with it. Then I went to see a shamanic healer, like you do, and she's very psychic, and usually picks up ancestors and that sort of thing. She said to me one day, she was doing some work on me, and she said, there's someone or something in the room with you, but it's not a spirit as such. It's actually a part of you. And but he's over there. He's standing in the room, sort of separate but connected. And he's calling himself the Crowman. And immediately I thought, oh, hang on, how do you know this? Have you looked it up online? And I realised that there was nothing online at that point. So she said, yes, it's a part of you, and whenever you're a bit stumped about something or other, ask yourself, what would the Crowman do? And I've been doing that ever since. So that was the reason I created the character. And often I do ask, well, what would the Crowman do? And immediately I sort of go into that more sort of, free-flowing, more enchanted sort of mindscape.
I get that. I get that, because my kind of alter ego is the fairy whisperer, and that was a friend that gifted me that name. And obviously there's lots of different fairy whisperers, but it was I was out with her one day. It was 2018, and we were walking together, and she just turned to me and said, "Claire, you are the fairy whisperer." I was like, yeah, I like that. That kind of describes what I do. Going into nature, how I see nature, and photograph it, put it in my art, and talk about it, etc. So, yeah. And as soon as I connect with that and think of myself, in that magical way, and I have this image of what she looks like, it's like you take on that that cloak, don't you? And
Yeah.
step into that place.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's a form of magic, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
A conjuring.
Mm.
A conjuring.
Mm.
It's inner spirit.
Yeah.
For want of a better term.
This looks like a little lookout, doesn't it?
It does.
It's almost like I can imagine coming back here with a mat and sitting there and just taking in the surroundings, perhaps meditating. Yeah. Perhaps when we get up to the rocks, we could just have a few minutes of like connection.
Yeah.
Whilst we recover.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're nearly there, aren't we?
Yeah.
I've got no idea.
So just talking about, Ethan and I were just talking about choosing ways to walk, and the way we've come is very wild. I've never been to this particular part of the wood before, walked up this path, and you were just saying about it being, you were putting it into good words.
Well,
Ethan.
we decided to meet, didn't we, at Newbridge car park, and it's a lovely place, but it's very touristy.
Yes.
And we could have chosen just to walk along the river there.
Yeah.
And it's fine, nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But there probably would have been a lot of walkers, a lot of people maybe picnicking. All good. But we chose to go here, and it just energetically, it just feels different, doesn't it? And the fact that we had a bit of a struggle to get on the path. Have you mentioned the fallen tree?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh no, I didn't. Yeah, there was a fallen tree. There's a few fallen trees, but there was a huge one, wasn't there, that we had to sort of crawl under all the branches and come up the other side to get our bearings again. And I mean, this is my kind of walk I seem to end up on when I'm doing my own walks and things. But yeah.
And we haven't seen a soul.
No.
So, yeah.
But in general, people that come to these places that are visiting just want to do the simple walk along the river and go to the well-trodden places. But it's when you come off the beaten track, like Robert Frost's poem, that, Two Roads, Diversion of Yellow Wood and all that, one of my favourite poems, that's when you discover the real essence of the place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. As you probably found, creating the map.
Yes.
And
often I just got hopelessly lost.
yeah.
Many a time I ended up in a mire with the sun coming down and thinking, am I ever going to get home?
Yeah, oh gosh.
I can look back now and laugh.
Have you had any, what you consider sort of paranormal, supernatural experiences whilst you've been exploring these places?
On the moor itself?
Yeah.
Well, it's more sort of a sense of atmosphere. So the mist coming down. Nothing I could say hand on heart was particularly paranormal. I'd love to said yes. A sense sometimes of being watched.
Yeah.
But not in a sort of creepy way. Just feeling that you're not quite alone. That you've gone into. There's certain places you do feel, well, this is. Actually, I've written about this in the article. There are places where you feel you shouldn't be.
Yeah. That
humans aren't meant to be treading here. And then other places where you feel welcome, and it does feel like a fairy place. And you're expecting to see something out of the corner of your eye, So no, I wonder if it's partly because, I don't know, is it partly because I'm not desperate to see these creatures, but there is that feeling, come on, Grimgy, where are you? Come and say hello. So I will often walk through a place like this and say, well, if you're here, feel free to communicate.
Come forward. It tends to be people that are just caught off guard, doesn't it? They're not expecting, seeing the phantom wood or the monks not knowing anything about the area. Perhaps there's not that preconception, and then all of a sudden, what's that? So maybe it seems to be a common theme, doesn't it, with these experiences?
Yeah. Maybe once I finish the book. So I've done the map, finished the book, and then suddenly it'll all happen.
Yeah, they'll all come after you.
Once they know they're not going to be featured on my map or something.
I'm sure they're happy, about what you're creating. It's, beautiful. I'll just explain. If we sound like we're out of breath, it's because we are. We're just walking up a really steep hill. Oh, look, do you think that's the lane?
I'm trying to remember.
Don't you? When I walk past these old cottages on the moor sometimes, and I think, I'd love to just go in there and have a nose around. Excuse me.
There's some lovely footage on it's on a DVD. Maybe you can get it on Blu-ray as well. And it's from the BFI, and it's a collection of folklore documentaries.
Yeah.
And it's got one. It's about this couple that live on Dartmoor. It's gorgeous.
I'd like to see that.
What's the name of the collection? Something to do with the barley mow.
Oh, yes. That name rings a bell.
It's got a few Dartmoor-related documentaries on it, actually.
You were in a really nice flow just now, and I forgot what we were talking about.
Oh,
It's always the way.
I was mentioning my process again, wasn't I? And saying how there were times when I just thought, blimey, am I ever going to get this finished?
Yeah.
I started off, I wanted it to be this art piece, and so I was very particular about how it looked. And then I got to a stage where I just kept adding more and more, and friends were saying, I think you need to stop now, and I'm thinking, I know it's probably ruined, isn't it? But I kept going, and then something shifted, and I thought, well, yes, I still want it to look beautiful, but it's also a map, and if you look at an OS map, it's crammed full of names, places. So in the end, I just thought, no, I'm just gonna get on as much as I can. Everything has a story. So that's it. And then I just got to a point where I'd run out of stories. Although since it's been published, I've got loads more to add to it.
Do you think, because there's one thing I love about the map is the detail, and I love the key, and then you've got the symbol for, for example, for a haunted house.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole list of haunted houses in that area, which I think is really cool. And what I like about it is that I can choose an area, coming to meet you today, photograph part of the map, that little area, so I've got it to take with me and I can sort of zoom in.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought of creating a digital map that people could access, or is that something for the future?
Yeah, I'd be up for that. I'm not the most technically gifted. I mean, I say that, I did create it. Everything was drawn by hand and then put on Photoshop, layered on Photoshop, but that's as far as my digital prowess goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, if someone out there wants to help me digitalise it, yes, that would be wonderful. It's probably the way to go. But saying that, I've always wanted something that was very tactile. And originally I was going to go for a wall map, but then there's something about these fold-up maps.
Yes. That's another thing I was going to ask is, because I love the portableness of having that map to carry around.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if you do poster versions for people to put on their wall.
I haven't got any for sale as yet. I've had a few printed. So where I work at the Arts University, there's a digital print bureau. So I've had a few printed for my boss. Wants one in student support office to scare the students. But I've just had one. I've just created one. I've just had one printed for myself as well. So yeah, I can do them. I'll probably get around to putting putting some up for sale at some point. Placemats, that sort of thing. I think it is. So we try it.
Yeah.
If it's not, it's just up there, but I think it is. I remember being
used
before.
Just lean on this gate a minute. Oh, wow. What a view. Never seen.
Quite a way, haven't we?
Yeah. I've never seen that view before. Amazing.
I think we're okay for time.
Did we talk about the ghost of Lady Ashburton?
No, we haven't talked about her.
Could you talk about her? Because she's headless, is she?
She
headless
is.
Ghost, right? Yeah. So,
again, there's not a lot to tell you apart from the fact she apparently appears in the driveway, walking down the driveway, and she's headless, and she used to live there. I'm not sure which Lady Ashburton it is. Doesn't say.
I wonder why she's headless. Is it just people can't see her head, or she?
I wonder if it was. It's an interesting one. There's a wonderful book. We were talking about Theo Brown earlier.
Yes.
Now, what's the book called? She's got a wonderful book, and she talks about the different sort of types of ghosts that have been seen. And she said that when we were a Catholic society, there seemed to be more sightings of headless ghosts, and that seems to have fallen away since the shift. It's a really good book because she discusses headless ghosts, and she has all these different theories about why people were seeing them at one point in history, which I can't remember now. And she talks about underground passages and now
yes,
it's I just can't think what the book's called now.
Feeling it's one that I looked up, might be part of the Exeter University.
It's a small
collection.
It's a slim volume.
Is it Goblin Gold?
No, but it's from that series.
Yeah.
I think it's Tales of something. Tales of mentions monks as well, ghostly monks.
I'd love to have met her. She was fantastic.
Yeah. Sorry, but there's not much else I can tell you about
That's
Lady
okay.
Ashburton.
And the other thing that really stood out to me, because you've drawn it quite clearly on the map, was the flaming wheel of Meltor.
Oh yes, so there was a tradition where people, I think, was that Beltane? They used to, once a year they'd roll this wheel down the Tor. So set it alight, and I don't know when that ended, whether it's ever been revived, but it's not going on as far as I'm aware at this point. Probably too dangerous.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah,
people walking up Haytor, flaming wheel coming towards them. It's Meltor, isn't it? And then we spoke about the ghostly man in chains, but I didn't record that one. So,
oh yes, that's
him.
outside. Now that
Liswell Gate.
Yes, Liswell Gate. So I tried to locate Liswell Gate. I think I have. I think it's actually Liswell Farm.
Right.
And there's you can see where there used to be a gate outside it. So it's at a crossroads, not far from here.
Right.
So I have found that, and that's just again not much to the story apart from the fact people used to say that they saw a ghostly man chained to the gate, but there's no indication of when, why.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing. You often get these snippets, and
yes,
and it does leave you thinking, I want to know more. It's like there's loads of folk tales on the map like that. The one about the cottage that bleeds once a year.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Oh, okay. So there's blood trickling out from under the doorway.
I saw the picture with the blood dripping down.
The bloody cottage. I don't know where it is. I mean, I know it's sort of around sort of Morton Hampstead way, but there's nothing. There's nothing I've come across that indicates where exactly it is, why. What happened there, and then to make it even more tantalising, in the same source, it mentions a haunted field, a spectral field a mile down the road. And again, no more information. So there is this feeling of, my work's not quite done yet.
No.
Surely someone somewhere knows more about these tales.
Yes. Or has experienced them, had experiences of them, unexpected experiences. Amazing. But I'm fascinated by what causes these hauntings. Why would people... It must be a time slip rather than a haunting. Maybe.
Yes. Well, I mean, the one that comes to mind for me is the Phantom Cottage in Chagford. The one that featured in Elliot O'Donnell's book.
Yes.
There's been so many different versions of it as well. But that, that story. But I'd love to know where the cottage was.
Yeah. Again. Yeah. Local people might know, mightn't they?
Yeah.
And.
But that apparently only appears every 12 years.
Yes. And that got me thinking as well. I thought, well, how do people know it only appears every 12 years? Is it because it's been people that have just seen it at that time?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it's 12 years later and someone else has seen it.
I also have to ask.
Yeah.
How come Elliot O'Donnell seems to have come across a lot of these places? Because he actually apparently stayed in a phantom hotel in Plymouth.
Did he?
He did. And he describes it in one of his books.
Really?
And it's very detailed. He talks about the person at the front desk who greets him, and then as he's walking towards his room, he spies someone in another room and a man with a dog, and they wave at him. And he said in it, he felt like he'd been there before. He felt incredibly at home. And everyone was so lovely. So he decided a year later to come back.
Right.
And that's when he was told there is no hotel here. There never has been.
Oh, I see.
And that's in Plymouth.
In Plymouth.
And it's near Millbay.
Right.
It's not because near where the old railway station used to be.
Maybe he had that experience and then was interested in other similar experiences, and that's why he spoke to the women. Yeah, the woman that had the cottage experience.
That's true, because he never actually went to the cottage, did he?
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to know, isn't it? All this time later, but it's a common thing that I've come across for people that have had these experiences of seeing fairies or any paranormal experience, where they feel that they've been to the place before.
Yeah.
Or they've had a past life there, or so that. To me, by him saying that, unless he's taking that from somebody else's experience and thinking, oh, this is what people often say, is quite a genuine thing to say that, I felt like I'd been there before. That's quite one of those details that you can't really invent, I think.
No.
Because a lot of people say, don't they, that he made up a lot of his stories.
They do. And that's why I mentioned it. But I don't want to be too sceptical about this, because I think there's something in a lot of these tales. Yeah,
even if it was somebody else's experience that he'd heard and then decided to invent it for himself. It gets you thinking, doesn't it, about these possibilities of stepping into other times. And
one of the I'm sort of moving away from Dartmoor here, but one of the best time slip stories I've ever read about was in a book. It was a recent book on haunted Liverpool.
Oh yes.
Do you know the one about so this chap walks into a shop somewhere in, I don't know Liverpool very well, but he describes how it shifts in front of his eyes, and he noticed when it shifted. So he went back in time. He said it was like being in the 1940s. And he noticed someone else in the shop wearing modern-day attire like himself.
Yes.
And they clocked each other. Then it shifted back, and he went up to her and he said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "Yes." So he got that validation. Yeah. Then he started to do some research. Actually, no, he left the street. He left the shop and went out into the street as well when it was still in this other sort of period and noticed things such as a vehicle with a sign on it, and jotted it down. And then he went home and he looked up some of these things, and lo and behold, the shop that appeared suddenly was once there, and I think it was like a baker's van, did exist at that time, etc.,
Yes.
etc. So to me, that just feels so plausible, so so real.
Yeah. And a lot of people have had these experiences as well, Ethan, because after doing my talk, I had a chat with the people that were there. The amount of people that have had time-slip experiences, talking about... I mean, that's why I'm saying it'd be good for you, with your talks. You will come across people that say, oh, yeah, as you know, oh, yeah, that happened to me. And it's amazing, really, because... sort of mainstream media or whatever makes out that these experiences are rare, but I don't think they are.
No.
I think a lot of people have experiences, but maybe just don't talk about them for fear of being ridiculed or whatever. I think there's still that fear. Just heard the church bells. I'm going to head back now to where we're parked at Newbridge.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. This is the part of the recording with the church bells in the background that sound distorted into a strange, creepy sounding music box. See what you think. And a lot of people have had these experiences as well, Ethan, because after doing my talk, I had a chat with the people that were there. The amount of people that have had time-slip experiences. There's a couple of tales on Dartmoor about certain rocks or tors that supposedly if you put your ear to the rock, you'll hear the church bells ringing from the nearest town, which may be a few miles away. Or that if you put your ear to a rock, you'll hear the church bells of the pixies churches. So yeah, Ethan, you were going to share about another map that we mentioned, I think, earlier on, but yes.
Yes, so as much as I'd like to think I've created the only Dartmoor Folklore Map, I haven't.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't become aware of this map until I'd already started mine. It was back in lockdown, actually, and from time to time I would just do a Google search, Dartmoor Folklore Map, whatever. And then one day this image came up of a Dartmoor Folklore Map in an antique shop in, at the time I think it was West Brompton in London, in West London. And it said it was a Victorian map.
Right.
So I became very intrigued.
Oh.
Not that detailed. It was hard to tell if it would been hand drawn or printed or whatever. Quite expensive, so I thought, okay, maybe I'll leave that. But then I kept being drawn back to it.
Yes.
And the years passed. And then I convinced myself I didn't need it, because I'm making my own one. and then actually earlier this year I was going up to London and I ended up, I was near West Brompton.
Right.
And I thought, I'm going to track down that shop just to have a look,
Yeah.
see what it's like. And I got to the shop and it had closed down. There were still things in the shop, but there was a sign on the door saying it was no longer open. So I thought, okay. But at this point I was hooked, so I thought, I still had the number. There was a website, and I rang the number, and I got this chap on the other line, and he said, we're down in Devon now.
Yes.
I was like, right, whereabouts? And he said it was Bubbly Salterton.
Oh.
He said, just come down sometime. We're open. So I thought, okay. And I was on my holiday at the time, so I had a few more days in London, and when I came back down here, I thought, I'm going to pop down to Bubbly Salterton, have a day trip there.
Yeah.
And I got there and I couldn't find this place. Walked up and down the high street, walked into another antique shop and asked around, and someone said, "Oh, well, there is this chap. He's taken over the old post office, and they're just renovating it at the moment. I think there's going to be an antique shop there." So I went there, a couple of builders, and I asked them. They said, "Oh, yes, that's the place." You just missed him actually. He was here a minute ago. And I was a bit confused. I said, "Oh, he told me to pop in."
Yeah.
So I rang the number again and got someone else. And he said, "Oh, blimey, this is the owner this time." So I'd spoken to his son before. And he said, "Oh yeah, I've just left. I'm back in London now." And I said, "Oh, well, you're..." Worked out now it was his son. I said, "Well, your son said I could just pop down." And he went, "Oh, I don't know what he's talking about. We're not ready yet." But the map is actually there. It's in a room upstairs. If you ask one of the builders, they've got a key. Maybe go and have a look. So I did, and there was something really charming about it. It's quite basic, but there was a beauty to it, and it was hand drawn, hand painted. And I just thought, okay, I've sold a few maps. I'm going to treat myself. When I bought it then and there, and I actually had to pay cash to one of the builders. So it felt a little bit odd. But anyway, I took it home, and ever since I've been trying to work out who created it, because there's some writing on the bottom part of the map, and it says Brian Letts,
Yeah.
the Three Ravens, Morton Hampstead. And that was it. And the rest was all to do with folkloric sites. So I got home, Googled the information. It's mentioned in a book on Morton Hampstead. I bought the book, and it basically says a chap called Brian Letts opened a shop, I should say, called the Three Ravens in Morton Hampstead in 1969. Now, as I said, the antique dealer had said it was Edwardian, Victorian. When I spoke to him the second time, he thought it was Edwardian.
Right.
It's got an old frame. So the mystery still remains. I don't know if Brian Letts is. I don't think he's the artist. I feel, because I've done a bit of research on the shop, and it used to be a craft and gift shop. And Brian Letts is one of the famous diary family, the Letts diaries.
Yes.
And they used to. There's quite a few of them used to live in Morton Hampstead. And I did pop in to the visitor centre in the town a few weeks ago, but they couldn't tell me much. So, if anyone listening has got any idea who may have created a Dartmoor Folklore Map from potentially the Victorian Edwardian period, or maybe even later, that's now in my possession, do let me know. And yes, if you've got any information about Brian Letts and the Three Ravens, which, the name the Three Ravens is based on a folk tale as well.
Yeah.
Black and Stone Rock folk tale. So there you go. One day I think I'll have an exhibition where I showcase that map and my map and maybe a few other artefacts. So there is a story to be told.
Yes, I wonder who he was. So thank you for your time today, Ethan.
My pleasure, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been really lovely.
Yeah, it's been lovely, hasn't it? Thank you for listening to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your feedback and comments about anything that was covered in this episode. I especially loved Ethan's account of his mother's fairy encounter with her grandfather when she was a child. How magical and enchanting to be taken to a field and shown a fairy. This enchantment that is within the land is all around us, and I'm really thankful to Ethan for creating his map and bringing this enchantment alive so that we can hold this map in our hands and follow the route of some of these stories, these happenings, these encounters that people have had, and stories from folklore It's literally like re-enchanting the land and holding enchantment within your hands as well as you hold the map and plan your route for the day. So Ethan and I just covered a tiny corner of Dartmoor on our walk. It's such a huge place, and it's not unique in the world for folklore. There are many places across the rest of the UK, Europe, US, Australia, Asia, everywhere in the world that has these stories that are within the land, and these spirit guardians that look after the land for us and were there long before we arrived. So we need to tread carefully, tread lightly on the land, and listen to our intuition about where we place our feet on the land, and also to listen to the wisdom that is there to guide us along the way. This is such an incredible world that we live in, and there's so much enchantment to be found. It's as simple as picking up a book from the library or even researching on the internet these days and finding out what the folklore is in your area. There are many authors that are writing magical books about the landscape, encouraging us, inviting us to step back onto the land and listen to the stories of the land. And I myself am embarking on this quest as well with my book about the Dartmoor pixies and all of their places on Dartmoor. We all have our own unique journeys with our landscapes and stories to tell. And this is really important to pass on to future generations, to keep this enchantment alive, and to keep the old words alive as well, the old words that describe the landscape. And many of these old words are preserved in these old tales. So, until next time, remember to keep your heart open and to be the change. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.